Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my Phantom Thoughts. This first call is from Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. In my previous regular podcast, I had a couple of messages from Jason that I played. Turns out there were actually 3. I had just flat out missed one, and it was a pretty good one after I listened to it, so I wanted to include it here. So this one is referencing back a couple of podcasts before, talking about how I spoke about why I was doing solo play instead of playing in a group.
Hey, Jason here. The other Jason, the one from Nerds RPG Variety Cast, calling in reference or response to Jason Hobbs of Random Screed's call, talking about your solo play and the fact the bandits fought to the last man. It's interesting. So even in regular play with a game master and a number of players, we've seen this thing where you roll morale and the enemy decides to stay and fight even when it doesn't make sense. And so that brings up the question, well, do you fudge the dice? Because to have them, if you do decide to roll the dice and then you have them run anyway, at that point you're fudging the dice. So, you have to decide how procedural you want to play it. I think with solo game, so to back up to the regular game where you have, multiple people in the game, I think it would be totally acceptable not to roll the dice and have the bandits run away. But in a solo game, I think we're much more likely to do the procedural thing and roll those dice and to follow what the dice say. So we don't feel we're unduly influencing the story, right? So I would have done it the same way you did it. And honestly, in a the solo games are real games. In a regular game with multiple players, I've been in plenty of games where morale's been rolled and people have, enemy NPCs have fought to the death because the dice have said they're going to do this. And that's probably because I play with a group that the groups I play in tend to look down on fudging dice and not following those die results. But I've also been in games where the GM has said, well, I'm not going to roll. It doesn't make sense. They're going to run off. Right. And I've even played with GMs that have done one or the other in different games. Right? So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, but I do think we're probably more likely to fall back on the dice and depend on the dice in a solo game than not. And I thought that was an interesting thing and wanted to share it. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm sorry I missed this call the first time around. I agree. I think the dice are more of an arbitrator in solo play simply because that's the only randomizer, second mind, or what have you that is in the game when you're playing a solo game, because your own mind is going to tend to be on one track, and you can play different ways and see things from different perspectives. I mean, it's something that people have been doing for a long time in the wargaming world, when they play a game solo that doesn't, before the advent of things like bots that allow the game to have kind of a mind of its own, where you're playing both sides and you're trying to compartmentalize knowledge. But it's not easy. And of course, if you develop, an attachment to PCs or characters or something, there's always that idea that, well, we're going to make decisions that make it more likely they continue to survive and continue on and be successful. So that's why the dice are very important. That being said, if I had thought that there was, it made more sense to have some of the bandits retreat earlier than they did or whatever, I probably would have gone ahead and done it if it was just simply an obvious thing. The reason why I left it to the dice was because, to me, it wasn't that obvious. There were times where I looked at the different factors that work into, when you're going to roll the dice and affect it negatively and positively, that it really didn't make sense for them to even be checking morale, because in that particular section of the battle, it was going, if not well, then at least pretty even. So the chance for victory was either theirs for the taking or at least up in the air versus just being completely against you. And then when it got to where it was more negative, leaning more the way of the nomads, that was when a lot of the morale rolls kicked in, and they they succeeded a lot of the time. And then when they failed, they faced the consequences, because when you run away from an enemy you're fighting, he gets some shots in. But I do agree that with solo play, you do have to have that factor that dice provide, that give you the randomization and the chance to react creatively to what's going on in the world when you're playing both the PCs and the world. So I thought that was a great point, and I appreciate the call.
Hey, Jason here. I really enjoyed the last podcast. I do think it's totally appropriate for them to take those cubs, back with them and train them up. I think that's something we would have definitely done back in the day, and the rules support it. So I think you should do it 100%. Like I say, I'm really enjoying the solo game. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, thank you for that, Jason. Yeah, when I read the entry on wolves, and it talked about wolf cubs and people having the opportunity to take them and train them, it just seemed that like that would be something that Edgar would want, the way I have a conception of what Edgar is, partly as a druid and partly as just what his personality is, and the path he was on before he joined the party. And I also thought that uh, Gus, seeing himself as kind of the leader of the party, the one that put the party together, and wanting to show respect for fellow party members, and also Bernie and kind of what he believes, that they would support that kind of idea. So it would be something that they would want to do, if not for their own self interest and what they could do with the Cubs, having them as part of a guard dog situation or something like that, training them up. That would be something that Edgar would want, even if it would be a situation where he would just kind of nurture them and then release them into the wild. So I'm not sure which direction that's actually going to take at the moment. It's something I'm going to have to figure out. I'm gonna have to figure out some dice way to figure it out, or I may just have it, a faux conversation in my head between party members and see how that goes. That's something I'm interested in seeing how it goes, as much from how I adjudicate it as what effect it may have on the future of the campaign. So thank you again for the call.
Hey Pink Phantom, Spencer here. I'm just calling to say that I've really been enjoying what you've been doing with RPGaDay month, and in your response to Jason Hobbs's call, you make it sound deceptively simple what you're doing. But well, I have to say I've been pretty impressed by it. Also, I thought it was interesting what you were saying about the game that Matt Coville is developing, the name of which escapes me, but I think that's a great idea, having the name describe the kind of game that it is. And I know there's been some talk around whether games should include that whole description of what is an RPG. Should a game devote time to trying to explain that? Wouldn't it be better if the game used that space to describe what kind of game it was, rather than trying to define this sort of nebulous medium? I also wanted to say thank you for giving a shout out to my podcast. And thanks again for what you're doing with RPGaDay month. I very much look forward to listening to it in its entirety at the end of the month. Cheers.
Thank you for the call and the kind words, Spencer. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun using the RPGaDay keywords to kind of contribute to the solo campaign. It's really worked out nicely. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, I guess maybe I did make it sound a little simpler than what it actually is. I know I find myself sometimes just with the logistics and the information, getting everything organized. It's a little different. Just me talking into the mic, it's a little easier, except when I start going, blah, 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 and I have to go back and kind of redo that part. But it's a lot of fun, and I guess probably because of that, I don't see it as much as work as maybe it probably actually is, or at least would seem to other people. And as far as what you were saying about the new RPG that Matt Colville and his team over at MCDM are developing, yeah, I do like that idea, especially in the design phase of having the name be what you're going for, because it lets you have that focus. And it would be useful to have it be, if not the name, then a little subtitle beneath the name when you publish an RPG, exactly what it is and what it's about. I know that definitions can be tough, and we've seen that with the RPG industry, and I've seen that in the wargaming industry, trying to explain what an RPG is, define what an RPG is, define what a wargame is. It creates a lot of rancor sometimes that, you know, this is included, this is not included, this is what's a proper RPG, this is not what's a proper RPG. And sometimes in the conversations I see taking place various places online, I get a little miffed with how restrictive some people have their argument of what is a proper RPG, or what is the correct D&D is, kind of the, I guess, the big thing, the edition wars and all that. And it's something that I think it kind of relates to something that Jason Hobbs has been talked about sometimes on Random Screed, and Runeslinger Anthony on the Casting Shadows podcast have talked about in terms of levels and layers of playing RPGs, and kind of describing what those different ways and different levels of play, layers of play are within playing an RPG, and how they affect what a game is, and how do you interact with those different styles, different overviews of the game. How do you play that? And I think that's something that's missing. They talk about that something that's missing in the RPG world, and I think it is. And I think part of it is because things like Edition Wars or D&D style games versus indie games, those kind of conflicts get into it. You start describing things that way. OSR. What is the OSR? Is the OSR dead? Is the OSR good? Or is the OSR toxic? And we get into those kind of things, and the RPG world kind of gets tied up in that, and so it doesn't always do a good job of explaining how to play a specific game, and what is involved in a specific game, without trying to redefine what an RPG overall is, or define what an RPG overall is. And it's something I've seen in the board game industry evolve when I used to listen to a lot of those kind of podcasts, where they used to describe when the types of board games that are beyond just the generic family board games, the brand names that we all know, that are a little more complex, a little more strategy. A lot of people call them strategy games. When they started building back up again, rising back up again, and having kind of their own renaissance in the late 90s, early 2000s, and onward, they would, a lot of times the styles would be defining them. They were usually fell into a category of German games, and later Euros and Ameritrash style games. And usually they fit into those two categories. And then later on, it evolved where it was more about, they were described by their mechanics. It was area control, or it was action selection. Uh, it was a rondelle game. It was an auction style game. And so they started describing their games that way, and they developed kind of their own vocabulary for that. Once you got into that world, it would you could kind of tell just from that lexicon, a few key words, you would know what they were talking about. And even within the games, they would kind of explain what that word means for somebody that was coming in new, so that you had a way to, just a shorthand, to let people who played those kind of board games, know whether a game like that is for them or not. And that's really what the labels are good for. It's for, this is the type of game you would like to play, because you play this other game that's a similar style, or similar mechanic, or similar theme. And that's the other thing they use. They talk about the theme of the game. So the theme of the game and the mechanics of the game, and together that lets you know what the game is about. And I think that's something that RPGs are starting to do, but there's still, that kind of idea in the greater consciousness of people who come in to play RPG equals D&D. And I know for people who create games that are not much like D&D and maybe don't even care for D&D, or especially the company that's currently making D&D, they, they kind of when somebody gets that idea, because now they're trying to explain that their game is not that, and they have their own kind of negative feelings about that maybe interfere with that explanation. But I'm rambling on. But thank you for the call. I think that's a great thought about the process of, how to title a game, how to develop a game, how to define what a specific game is without trying to go into the whole, and here is what an RPG is, that so many games seem to fall into. So thanks again for the call, Spencer. I really appreciate it. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the idea of tiers of play in D&D and I guess in RPGs in general, and what it means to a campaign when you change tiers and how does that affect the campaign. And what kicked this off is at the beginning of the episodes of the Basilisk Kills Breakdown, the creator of that campaign that serves as the GM introduces the podcast as a mid-level adventure, a mid-level campaign. And looking at the blog that supports that podcast, they list the various characters that the players play, and the main characters that each of them have is 6th level. And it struck me as odd that would be mid-level. Just that was my natural reaction. And as I kind of looked into it and thought about it, I realized that was kind of a more modern mindset, maybe, that mid-level, that 6th level is not mid-level. That was my idea. Because 3rd and 5th edition D&D went to 20th level, 4th edition went to 30th level. If you go back to BX, those books went back to 36th level, and AD&D really didn't have a level cap on anything. You could just keep going. It's just at some point there were limited benefits in terms of hit points and things that you got that were, in terms of the mechanics, you get these things when you progress beyond this point. But there was and everything was sort of divided into, either intentionally or just the way they were organized, into kind of tiers of play. BX had 5 different box set, and each box set talked about a different set of levels. You had basic, expert, companion, master, and immortal. In terms of 4E, it explicitly divided the 30 levels into 3 tiers of play. The first 10 were heroic, the second 10 were paragon, and the third 10 were epic. 3rd edition, I don't have as much information, and I haven't done as much looking into 3rd edition as some of these others. It didn't have I don't believe it had an explicit division. It went 1 through 20, and then they later added a book that was considered epic level D&D, which a lot of the blogs and forums that I read, a lot of people didn't ever seem to really use that much, because they made a pull from here and there. And 5th edition divides it into 4 tiers in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Levels 1 to 4, local heroes; 5 to 10, heroes of the realm; 11 to 17, masters of the realm; and 17 to 20, masters of the world. And in basic D&D, in AD&D, it really didn't divide it so much, but there was a point where each character suddenly began to reach what was called name level, and would be eligible to begin domain level play, building a stronghold, building a wizard tower, building a temple, creating a thieves guild, things of that nature, where they're becoming involved in the world on a bigger case. And that was usually levels 8 to 11, depending on the character class, most of them being at 9. So in that circumstance, mid-level, 6th level would fit as mid-level, because you're getting toward that domain level play. But one of the things about the Basilisk Hills breakdown is they are engaging in that domain level play to an extent now. They're carving out a stronghold in the wilderness as part of their play. It's a big part of what they do, and the logistics of doing that and moving things around and creating alliances that can support them and they can support is a big part of what they're doing in that podcast. So that got me to thinking about how much would these levels of play, and I don't know, having not experienced a lot of them, how much difference is there between these levels of play, and does that turn people off? When you get to a certain level and the style of the campaign changes, maybe because the characters are so powerful or just because of the types of challenges that they need to face in order to face any kind of a challenge. You know, we're too powerful for dungeon crawling now. We have to go to building a kingdom or being involved in the situations that would put us in the middle of a mass battle or in confronting princes and kings and emperors. Or we're going to have to start plane hopping, where we're dealing with demons and gods on a regular basis. And so we're having to make alliances and fight that level of creature in order to have a challenge or to have anything resembling that would be worth doing, other than you show up, you wipe everybody out, and you win. There you go. Win button. Push that win button. Is there a point in a campaign where you just feel like we need to start over? We need to get back to the beginning. We need to get back to basics. I prefer playing first 3 levels. I prefer to be playing first 5 levels. You see a lot on some of the internet interactions on social media and sometimes in forums and things like that, where people do express that, where after a while in a campaign, they've reached a level where what their characters are having to do to challenge them, to be challenged, is not what they want to do in a game. So how does that play out? Do you try to set up the campaign so that you continue doing mostly the same things just with stronger monsters? Or do you retire those characters and go back to first level, or maybe not first level, maybe second or third level, if you want to start off a little stronger than just being barely above regular folks? So those were my thoughts on that. What is it about? What do you consider a mid-level campaign, regardless of the system you're playing? And maybe how does that fit within the system? What type of play do you think is mid-level play? Is exploration and dungeon delving, is that always basic level? And then when you start getting into the domain level stuff, or you start getting involved in the machinations of higher powers, so to speak, on different planes of existence, is that when the theme and the structure of the campaign changes? And does that appeal to you? Do you like the idea of we're doing things one way and we're going along and things are going well and we're progressing, and now we're going to have to change up and go in a different direction? Not just there are different challenges that we have to face, but it's entirely different style of play. And would that incentivize you to start over from the beginning? And is that why a lot of campaigns seem to peter out and fall apart? On the Red Dice Diaries, John Allen Large just put out an episode called Enthusiasm Dwindling for a Campaign, that talks about why do campaigns flag and falter. Could this be part of the reason? And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. So now we have another random encounter. And it's interesting, when I was trying to figure out how this world was going to operate in the early going of this campaign, I said that the dragon would have scared almost everything off with its rampage, and it would take so long before creatures started moving back in, and so long before intelligent creatures started moving around. And just the chance of the dice have kind of gone that way. When the time that I established that there really wouldn't be anything for the characters to run into, I was still rolling dice because there was a slight chance they'd run into something, and I was getting no random encounters. And now, as things have opened up and they've gotten to the point where pretty much anything is possible out there in the world, they're rolling random encounters more often. That's an interesting aspect that the dice are, and my ideas and the dice are actually dovetailing versus what I'm saying and what the dice are coming up with. So that's something interesting I just thought I'd mention. But getting on with this random encounter, the random encounter is hobgoblins. And so we're going to see what exactly we're dealing with here. We're going to roll some dice. So hobgoblins can be anywhere from 20 to 200. So I'm going to roll a d10 and multiply that number by 20. I got a 3, so that's going to be 60 hobgoblins. And according to the Monster Manual entry, 60 hobgoblins will have 1 leader and 2 assistants for every 20 hobgoblins. So that's 3 leaders and 6 assistants. The next thing we need to do is roll to see, are they in lair? Only a 25% chance. And with a 3, they are in lair. So the party has run across a lair of hobgoblins. Now, this is interesting because this is kind of the same path the party has been traveling back and forth, shuttling treasure through several times. So this means the hobgoblins have moved in just recently, which in that aspect, only having 60 out of a potential 200 really makes sense because it's probably a small group of hobgoblins moving back into the area and they have just now run across some sort of, well, let's see where they are, because in the entry it says it could be 80% chance that they will be an underground lair, so that would be in some sort of cave entrance would be where they'd be running across, versus above ground. So roll the dice here, and 31%. So it's an underground lair, so they've taken up residence in some kind of large cave area, fairly nearby the trail that the party is on. Otherwise, they wouldn't have encountered them. So now the next thing we need to do is figure out sort of where they are in position. Is the cave kind of far back, so there's some distance between them? Are they nearby? Do they have some guards nearby on the road? Do they have some kind of raiding party that our party has run into? So I'm just going to roll a d6, and you know what? I'm going to let this be the surprise rolls. Use the surprise rolls for this. So normally it's a 1 or 2 on a d6 is surprise. So if the goblins surprise the party, I'm going to say that yes, the party has run across the area of their lair, but they've actually run up on a raiding party that is returning to the cave, and so it's kind of in their path. Anything other than that, they're kind of at a distance from the lair. And let's say on a 3 to 4, there may be some sort of sentries nearby the road, but there's nothing immediately in the party's way. So the party would still have the option in that circumstance of trying to get away, of parlaying, of combat, or whatever could result from that. On the party side, if they surprise the goblins, then they are definitely at a distance. But because of the effects of the wish on bringing Sven back, that creatures kind of sense him when in the random encounter situations, we're going to reduce the party's opportunity to surprise them to, say, 1 out of 2. All right, so rolling, did the party surprise the goblins? On a 3, they did not. Did the goblins surprise the party? On a 5, they did not. So we have a circumstance where there's a cave some distance off the trail, but still within sight, where the party can see the hobgoblins and I think I said goblins before. It is hobgoblins. The party can see the hobgoblins, and the hobgoblins can see the party, but there's still some distance between them. And since they are in lair, these hobgoblins, in addition to the 60 hobgoblins and the leaders and assistants, they're going to have a chief with 6 bodyguards that are basically the same as the leaders. as well as they'll have females, they'll have young, and they will have some guards some carnivorous apes. 2 to 12 carnivorous apes. So let's get another D6 here. A couple of D6s rolling. And we're going to roll up 8 carnivorous apes. So 60 goblins, 8 carnivorous apes, and assorted, essentially, family members, females and young. So now we'll just have to see what happens with the goblins and the party. And that means going to the old encounter reaction table. So we're rolling a percent dice. And with a 25, and Sir Gus is leading the way with his 30% reaction adjustment, will give us a 55. That gives us neutral, uninterested, uncertain. So these hobgoblins are not looking to really come after the party. They're not looking to start anything or antagonize them. They're just being essentially wary. Before the party can get to the keep, they have another random encounter in the pre-dawn hours. This one is lion. There are 3 types of lion listed in the monster manual. One is your regular lions, which it mentions thriving from desert to jungle, swamp to savanna. The mountain lion, which is forest, deserts, as well as mountains. And the spotted lion, which is also known as cave lions. They are larger spotted specimens. They roam the plains of the Pleistocene epoch. So, given the terrain, I'm going to say they're more likely to run into mountain lions than the other 2 types. So I'm going to roll. You know what? Let's break out the old D12 here. D12 doesn't always get a lot of love. We're going to say on a 1 or 2, it's regular lions. On a 11 or 12, it's spotted lions. And anything in between will be mountain lion. And on a 10, it's mountain lions. So they will encounter from 1 to 2. So let's get the old D4 here. On a 1 or 2, it's 1. On a 3 or 4, it's 2. And it's a 3, so there are 2 mountain lions. These will be armor class 6. They have 3+1 hit dice, so rolling up some hit points for these guys. They have, I rolled a 4, a 1, and a 1, so they're going to have a total of 7 hit points. Since this is taking place in the pre-dawn hours, we had said that it'll be one of the last 2 watches that will encounter these lions. We had previously established, I believe, that Sir Gus took the first watch so that he wouldn't be getting in and out, trying to get in and out of his armor in the middle of the night, and just to get out of it again to get some more rest. So he took the first watch, and that for spell recovery purposes, Bernie wanted to get continuous sleep, so he would usually be on the last watch. Since we have the whole party here, there's going to be 2 on each watch. Since Sven has the same he's kind of the other heavy armored hitter, like Sir Gus is, we'll put him on the last watch with Bernie. We'll say that Cudgel and Harl were on the watch after Sir Gus, and that Edgar and Quinn would be on the 3rd watch, before Bernie and Sven. So 50-50, break out the D4. On a 1 or 2, the mountain lions come along when Edgar and Quinn are on watch. And on a 3 or 4, it will be with Bernie and Sven. And on a 2, it will be with Edgar and Quinn. So now we need to roll for surprise. Mountain lions can only be surprised on a 1. And we're going to say that since, again, Sven has that little curse going for him, that monsters can pick him up easier, that there's no chance of them surprising the mountain lions. But the mountain lions can still surprise the party on a 1 or a 2. And on a 2, they have achieved surprise. So let's roll the other die to see how many surprise segments they get, if any. It's also a 2, so they get no surprise segments. So now we will roll for initiative. So the mountain lions roll a 5. The party rolls a 2. So the mountain lions attack essentially out of the early morning, just pre-dawn time. And since the party is surprised, even though there's not going to be any surprise rounds, we're going to say that it will be random who they will get to attack, because there will be 0 chance of reaction by Edgar and Quinn. And so they could randomly attack a sleeping party member. There are 11 party members: Sir Gus, Edgar, Cudgel, Bernie, Sven, Harl, Quinn, and the 4 valets. So I'm going to roll a d12, ignoring results of a 12. And on a roll of a 6, that's going to be Harl. So there, let's see, the other mountain lion will attack. On a 5, they attack Sven. So, according to the DM's manual, DM's guide, magically asleep, held, or paralyzed opponents, it's an automatic hit. It doesn't mention just regular sleep. So I'm going to go up 1 category to opponent stunned, held by both legs, slowed, partially bound, etc., and give the mountain lions a +4. Since both of these party members are asleep, they're not wearing any armor, and the mountain lions will be able to hit on a 6 or better, which means with a +4 bonus, they only need a 2. So we're going to roll the attack on Quinn, and they rolled exactly a 2. And their attacks are 1d3, 1d3, 1d6. So we'll have a couple of d6s and then roll a full d6. So we roll a 6, we roll a 4, and we roll a 3. The 6 and the 4 will be halved, so that will be 3, 2, and 3. That is a total of 8 hit points of damage on Quinn, and Quinn is at a -4 now. Now for the attack on Harl. With a 10, that easily hits. A 2, so that's 1 point of damage. A 1, so that's 1 point of damage. And a 5, so that's a total of 7 points of damage. That puts Harl at a -5 because he only had 2 hit points. Now it's the party's turn. The 2 awake members will act, Edgar and Cudgel. The others will have been awakened by the attacks, so they will not get an action this turn. So first we will go with Edgar. He has no 2-hit bonus with his melee weapon, which is a Lucerne hammer. He will get a +1 on damage if he hits. He is going to need to roll a 14 to hit, and he rolls a 15. So it does 2 to 8 points of damage +1. That's a 4. And that's a 3 +1 is 8. So he kills. So he walks up and just crushes the skull in of the mountain lion that attacked Harl. Now Cudgel, he needs a 15 or better to hit. He has no bonuses, and he rolls a 3, so he misses. So we move on to round 2. The remaining mountain lion rolls a 1 on initiative. The party rolls a 2, so just good enough to go first. So Cudgel takes another strike and misses again with a 2. Edgar comes over and tries to attack and hits with an 18. He's going to roll a 3 and a 1 +1 is 5. So the mountain lion is still up. The others having been awakened, Sir Gus has grabbed his longsword and comes over and attacks. He needs a 14 to hit. He has +4 to hit, so he needs a 10 or better. And with a 19, and with the bonus damage he gets, he has killed the mountain lion. So they have to move quickly to treat the wounds of their injured comrades. who are essentially at death's door, negative hit points. With that additional round of combat, Quinn will have slipped to -5, Harl to -6. Sir Gus can lay on hands on Harl, which will bring back 2 hit points, bringing him to -4. And then Sir Gus will essentially forego any experience for the killing the mountain lions by resorting to his cleric abilities and casting a Cure Light Wounds spell on Quinn. And he gets exactly 5 hit points, which brings him up to 0. And that is the state the party finds themselves in as they begin a new day. They're going to have to carefully load them onto the wagons as they finish their move to the keep. The opening music of this podcast is Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. Thank you for listening to Phantom Thoughts. I would love to hear your feedback. You don't have to be part of the show. If you want to contact me and let me know, hey, these are for your eyes only. I just wanted to give you thoughts, ideas, response, and it's really for your eyes or ears only. That's absolutely fine. I'd love to hear from you either way. So just let me know when you contact me. I don't want to be part of the show. There are lots of different ways you can contact me. You can send me an email at phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. And that can be a regular email, or you can attach an audio file to it. You can use the message button on my podcast site on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/phantom thoughts. You can contact me via my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. You can contact me via SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/phantom thoughts. You can contact me on Discord, The Pink Phantom. All this contact information is listed in the show notes of every episode. And thank you for those who call in. Thank you for those who don't call in. I appreciate you listening and hope you'll listen again next time. Until then, I hope you have a great day.